Good morning. It's day 4. Time to figure out a couple of things on the floor here. One of them being the actual gap between the tiles for the grout lines. And I brought up one of the old sheets just to kind of show you. This is how this stuff used to come. Came as a whole assembly. I'm having a little trouble picking this up to show you. This is one of the old ones, but you can see there's a mesh on the back, and that determines the actual gap between the tiles as long as you keep it sort of spread out. And that's 4 tiles by 3 tiles. That allows you to set all 12 tiles at the same time instead of setting them individually. I'm going to be setting individually, which is a lot of work. So I want to get spacers to make sure that my grout lines are consistent, but in order to do that, I need to know what that gap is. Now, I could measure the gap between these tiles, but what's more important is matching this edge coming along here. So I have a plan. Let me set up and I'll show you. All right, so I'm in kind of a tight spot here, trying to work, but what I've done is I've laid down tile that I had cleaned, and I butted them up right next to each other so there's no gap. At least that's what I'm attempting to do here. This is not 100%, but you see by the time I get to the end, there's a much larger gap between the tiles. I've lined it up on the left, and what I can do is I can measure the tiles here that have the grout all the way up to the end of, there we go, all the way to the end of that grout line, and then I can compare to figure out what this gap is. So let me go ahead and do that. I'll get the measurements and I'll tell you. Okay, that was unexpected. The measurement across the tiles that are not butted together, that have the grout lines, was 31 inches. And that's across 8 grout lines. Running from end to end on the ones that are butted together, I'm getting 30 1/4. That's a 3/4 inch difference across 8 grout lines, and if my math is right, that's 1.5 eighths, or 1.5 sixteenths. So that's 3/32, and they don't make a spacer for 3/32. So I'm somewhere between a 1/16 and an 1/8, and I'm going to have to figure out how to work with that. If I go to a full 1/8, then across 8 gaps, that's a full inch instead of 3/4 of an inch. So I would be 1/4 of an inch off by the time I got up to this point, which means I end up cutting tiles up against the tub. I'm going to have to figure that one out. The other things I need to deal with today, I need to get the caulking off the tub here. I need to scrape down the floor, and then the other thing I need to do before I go shopping for materials is I need to determine the actual thickness of the plywood here, so I can buy a matching thickness of plywood to replace the section I'm going to replace. So I've been debating whether to actually just cut out a small section and use that as a reference. I need to figure that one out. I do have a plan for figuring out where there should be a joist running this way and another one running that way. And the plan is I'm going to cut the plywood to span across so that I can then screw down the existing part, screw down the new part across both into one joist, and then do the same thing on the next joist. So I need to cut the width of the plywood to match, and then I've got to get the plywood to be long enough to go from here where I've cut back to, or somewhere near here. Actually, I don't think I want to have the joint immediately underneath the grout line. I think I actually want it in the middle of a tile. So I'm going to need to come part way up here, but then I've got to go all the way to the back there and get that whole piece out. That's going to be another part of the fun, is getting the old piece of plywood out, because I don't see right now, maybe that's a fastener right there, but I don't see the fasteners that are holding this in. So I need to scrape to figure that out, see if that's why I'm not seeing them. Also, there is from underneath, I'll show you, there's a piece of 2x4 between the subfloor and the pipe, and I think I want to remove that because ultimately the original ring was not level, and I'll be able to show you that with a level. But let's go downstairs and I'll show you what I'm talking about the 2x4. Okay, this would be what I was talking about with the 2x4. Let me try and zoom in. And you can see there's a piece of wood right there between the subfloor and the drain pipe. So the first question is that actually 2x4? Or am I wrong? And that might be 2x6. Let me grab a tape measure. Okay, this is a little tricky to do one-handed, but let's see. And, oh, almost. Now I gotta get you in frame. Actually looks like, yeah, that looks to me like 3.5 inches, or 2x4. So the question is that fastened in any way? So the next thing is, let's go into the shower here. Trying to walk around without stepping on things or dropping my phone. All right, now we're up nice and close. Actually, let's zoom back out. So the question is whether this is loose in any way. Is it just wedged in there? No, it feels to me like it's actually fastened on the top. So the next thing is going to be to get measurements and try and estimate where it is, and then I'll see if I can find the fasteners. If it's nails, it may be difficult to get out. If it's screws, I might be able to unscrew, and then I can try and get that piece out. What I'm wondering is if there's some flex left in the pipe here. My real concern is if I do this wrong, I'm going to end up breaking the seal, the glue seal, on the individual joints of the pipe. But I might be able to move it just slightly and level out that ring. Okay, according to my measurements downstairs, it should be somewhere between 5.5 and 5 3/4 from the center of the ring. So I'm going to grab the scraper and try and scrape, see if that helps at all. Otherwise, I may need to get some sandpaper to try and find the connectors. I don't know if they're countersunk or what. I'm not seeing anything obvious right now. So let me take a shot at that. Alright, well, I tried the scraper. That didn't get me anywhere. And I brought up a sanding block and tried that. It's not revealing anything. It is possible it's just glued on, in which case I wouldn't see any fasteners. So I think I'm going to move on to the next step, which involves taking some measurements between the drain and the joist on the left and the joist on the right. I'm going to get a drill up here, and the plan is I'm going to drill a hole where I think would be just inside the joist, and another hole which would be just outside the joist. Hopefully that'll be a little bit more obvious once I do it. But that's the plan. If I get the drill holes correct and hopefully not hit any electrical or anything fun like that, then I will know exactly where the joists are from above. And with that, well, actually, I wonder if I could sand roughly where I think it is and see if that would reveal some fasteners. But let me just sort of play with this a little bit and I'll let you know where I am. But ultimately the reasoning is I want the joist on the left and the joist on the right. I want to know exactly where they are So when I make my cut to cut the bad piece of wood out here, then I can pull it up and be able to fasten back down like I said before. So let me just play with this and I'll be right back. All right, so I went a little bit overboard. Things I knew needed to get done. I needed to scrape any high spots off the floor, and I pulled out a sander instead of just a sanding block to try and help me find fasteners, but I went, left and right, and I went to the back, and I am just not, unless that's a fastener right there in the middle, I don't know. I would think then I would find another one up along here. I'm just not seeing them. So, and then I did the same thing on the other side. There's just nothing, unless that's right there a fastener. I'm going to have to sort of try and dig in a little bit and see. But no matter. Ultimately, I need to get this out in pieces, so I need to go back to my original plan, which was to measure from below carefully so I know off the center of this drain how far to the left and how far to the right to go to make my cuts. So I'm cutting in the middle of the joist. So the plan is I'm going to pull out the drill. Well, first I'm going to go down and measure. Let's go take care of that. Okay, so the key, like I was saying, is from the center of the drain to the inside of this joist, and from the center of the drain to, I'll get my finger in view in the shot here, to the inside of that joist. If I can get those two measurements, then I can use a drill to try and make sure I've located very carefully the inside of the joist. Then I know it's going to be 1.5 inches to the outside of the joist. So I can drill a couple of holes in either case, probably here and then coming back this direction, and that's going to be a little scary. I don't want to hit any of this stuff, so I don't want to go down too deep. But ultimately, by doing that, hopefully I can locate the actual joist and know where it is so that I can cut in the middle of the joist. So let me get some measurements. Okay, if I've done this right, I should be 6.5 off the center of the drain in that direction, and 8.5 in that direction. So let me mark those out. Okay, I've drilled 2 holes. I left the drill bit in the one on the left, but the one on the right, where did it go? Oh, it's gonna be right there. So I'm gonna go downstairs and see if there's daylight. Okay, I'm off by a bit on the left, and I'm not seeing any daylight on the right. So let's get the left fixed first. Success, sort of. Let me see if I can get that in focus. I don't know how easy that's going to be to see. Let me try and shine another light up there. Sorry. Again, trying to do this one-handed. So you can see I've got one screw there and another screw there. And on the other side I only have the one. But that may be because this is not perfectly square to what I'm doing upstairs. So let me show you that. Okay, I used a framing square. I had a couple of different problems. I had a lot of back and forth trying to figure out what was going wrong. Ultimately, I switched from the drill bit to some trim screws. These are 1 5/8 inches. Let's put that on there and you can kind of see. That's 1 5/8 inches from the 4 to the, anyway. And then I finally decided, okay, what I'll do is I'll put the square up against the tile. That should give me a reasonable reference. I've got 2 screws. On a framing square, this is going to be 1.5 inches wide, and that should be the same as the 2x material down below. So in theory, if I put the screws just outside the framing square, I should be going just outside the actual joist down below. Now, that worked there, but it didn't work there, which means that either I put this in at an angle or it's not actually square to the tile, which I don't completely expect. But the other thing, I kept going back and forth because I'm going, where is my trim screw? How come I don't see it poking through? I thought this was going to be like 3/4 inch, maybe 1 inch plywood. No, I had to screw it almost all the way down because I think what we've got here is like 2 layers of 3/4 or a layer of 3/4 and a half, something like that. But over 1 inch of plywood, probably in 2 layers, which would give a tremendous amount of support to the toilet. That's a good thing, and also probably a tremendous amount of support to the bathtub, which is probably why they did that. But that would mean that they had to go all the way out to the hallway that way, and then I don't know if it's just 3/4 out in the hallway or if it's actually the entire second floor is double plywood. That was just a real interesting discovery. So now what I'm going to do is I'm going to undo these two here, and actually I'm going to just try and move this one over just slightly and see what happens, because it may be that I did put it in more at an angle than I thought I did. But I'm going to give that a shot. And then I also discovered that this one is getting pretty close to the joist that should be right about here. So I'm going to start searching for that joist, and that'll help me, because then I can probably cut across this way to match that joist, so I'm landing on top of a joist, but also probably on top of an additional sheet of plywood. That makes this really rigid, and that means I can probably just put in a regular 2x2 sheet of plywood cut to fit, and with only the circle cut for the ring, with the original circle already cut in the layer below. So really interesting sort of development, lots of back and forth, but I'm going to keep searching, and I'll bring you back when I finally get everything located. Okay, it has taken a lot of trips up and down, but I've drawn lines representing the 3 joists that I can work with. The last one is way back in the wall, so I can't really work with that, and there's nothing running across. But then the other question was, how deep is this first layer? So ultimately I'm going to use a hole saw. I'm going to drill down about 1/2 inch and see where that gets me. If not, then I'll go down to like 3/4 and hope that I can pull this back out, thus revealing how thick that top layer is. Okay, we have an answer. I managed to get the drill in there, although I did find one of the fasteners in there, kind of made the hole saw struggle a little bit, but this is the plug, and that appears to be 1/2 inch thick, so it looks like the top layer is 1/2 inch plywood. And now what I can do is draw another line between these 2 lines, and that'll get me a square set of lines. And maybe I'll get out the skill saw, set the depth for 1/2 inch, and start cutting and see how far that gets me. I'm probably going to need the other reciprocating saw to get me to the very back, because I can't get the skill saw all the way to the back, but we'll see. Okay, we've got lines, and the skill saw set to 1/2 inch, and a little hole there, but I'm going to go ahead and take a shot at this. Alright, I admit it, sometimes I get a little ahead of myself. So the the cutting is done. Smoked up the house a bit. The old skill saw, I don't know if it was the old wood or the skill saw or what, then I finished it off with the reciprocating saw, which worked out beautifully. Just kind of slid right through it, and now I've got a pry bar into there, and I've got it about half of it up. It's not pulling on the ring so far, which is wonderful. So I'm just going to keep going, and I'll let you know when I got it done. I think it took me longer to turn the music back off and go back to video. That literally came up in like another 15-20 seconds. I think I'm going to leave it the way it is right now. I mean, I've got a template for cutting a new piece. I can take some measurements. I got to actually run an errand, and while I'm out, I can see about picking up spacers for the tiles and a new piece of 1/2 inch plywood. And with that, I think I'll quit for the day. There's been a little bit of cleanup, but I gotta go get these errands run because I've been putting them off. So, until tomorrow.